Hello everyone, this is going to be the deck profile for the Royal Malefics Build 1. At least that's what I'm calling them, Royal Malefics, because Plant Princess, so Malefic plus Royalty. Okay, so jumping right into this, this is not a competitive deck. It's just meant to be fun, not to be taken too seriously. You could also consider it a fixer-upper deck. It could potentially be even better if someone wants to do so and actually work on it. It does have a lot of potential. So first card I'm running is, of course, Malefic, Cyber, and Dragon. This is the reason why I'm calling it Malefics at all, even though there's only 3, which that's kind of questionable to me, but hopefully no one complains. So naturally, this is the big beater of the deck. Have to have 3 of them. They combo with Skill Drain. It's just summon this and then pound your opponent down as quickly as you can and win. Next up is Night Express Knight. This is kind of being run in place of Barbaros, so it's kind of like the same style that you summon it becomes a 3k beater, but it does a little bit more than that because it's a level 10 and it's also searchable. So what that allows you to do is you can go into rank 10s with a Cyber and Dragon. There have been a few times where that was a good idea to do, and because I'm running 2 of it, I can also, if you have 2 of these, you can make a rank 10 with themselves. And then, of course, when you summon it, you can do so without tributes. Its original attack becomes 0, but then if you have Skill Drain on the field, it becomes a 3k beater. Next up is Titanial. Before I move on, I'm running this at 2, but if I could fit it at 3, I would do so. And the same goes for Titanial. I don't like having 3 of this card in my deck because it's a big monster. It's not always that easy to summon, so 2 seems really fitting. Especially because there's a lot of cards that I was gonna say if it gets banished it can negate itself, but okay, that is a worry if it gets banished. So it would probably be a good idea to side a 3rd one or run some stuff to protect it from being banished. Otherwise, this card is very, very cool, and it's what gave me the idea to do this deck in the first place. It has a built-in effect that if a card on the field gets targeted, and that could be even your opponent's side of the field, if it gets targeted, you tribute a plant-type monster. It could be itself, and then you negate that card and destroy it. So what I'm using it for is when I have Skill Drain on the field and my opponent tries to use something like an MST, they target Skill Drain, and then Titanial can just tribute itself and say no, and it negates it. And then what makes this really good is that this card is so easy to spam from the grave. There's Call to Haunted, you can use Miracle Fertilizer, you can spam it from the deck with Lone Fire, that gets it onto the field. You can use Mausoleum if it's in your hand to normal summon it, and it's like this card is going to get onto the field and it's going to protect the Skill Drain. Next up is Thuggish Limited Express Bat Train. This card is pretty cool because it searches out a monster that gets used with Skill Drain. There's not a whole lot of other monsters like that become searchable, and it's also not bad. It has 1800 attack, so if you want to beat down with it, I mean, you potentially can. It does work. It also has, you can inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent, so if it's your first turn, you want to do 500 points, you can. There's no downside. And this also combos really well with Dark World Dealings, which I'll get into in a little while. Then there is Zephyros. This is a staple in pretty much any deck that's running continuous cards, or I guess Morphing Jar, because especially with Miracle Fertilizer, what you can do is you activate Fertilizer, you bring back, say, Titanial or Lone Fire Blossom, then you use Zephyros' effect to bring it back to your hand, and usually when the monster that is attached to Miracle Fertilizer goes to the grave, Miracle Fertilizer goes with it, but then because you sent it back to your hand, this card is now, it's separated, it's detached from the Fertilizer, so then you can reactivate it and bring back another monster if you want. And that allows you to go into potential rank 8s, which I have some really good ones in the extra deck. And if you really need to, you can send Skill Drain back to your hands, although I'm not sure why you would, unless you want to use Morphing Jar or something. Next up is UFO Turtle. It is incredibly important that you either have Titanial or a Lone Fire Blossom that you can use from the grave or your hand. So the goal of UFO Turtle is simple. It's just to help with the consistency of getting out Lone Fire Blossom because you can only run it at 2, and this card alone doesn't actually have a whole lot of stuff that is Skill Drain friendly that you can use to search with it, so UFO Turtle seem really fitting. And next up is Lone Fire Blossom itself. This card is what makes the deck go round because you can pump out the all-important Titanial, which again, this is what protects your Skill Drain mainly, so it's very important that you get it onto the field. And then it's kind of like Titanial, that it goes with all the other plant support and stuff that brings it back from the grave. Then there is Dandelion. It's really hard not to run this card in a deck with Lonefire Blossoms because, one, it can summon tokens, and that lets you, it gives you some minimal defense just in case you really need it. It is a target for Lonefire, it's a target for Miracle Fertilizer and Call the Haunted. And then if you don't have a Mausoleum in your hand and you really want to tribute something, then you can use the tokens to bring out either Night Express or Titanial. And I've done that a million times, it is incredibly helpful. Next up is Morphing Jar. There are a lot of cards in this deck that not only do I want them in the grave, but I need them in the grave. So I use Morphing Jar and it adds a lot of consistency. So say I have Titanial in the hand and no way to summon it, or I have Bat Train and I really want Night Express, I can use Morphing Jar to send these things to the grave. It gives me more draw power, and then during the end phase, I can use Bat Train, or I can use Miracle Fertilizer to bring back this, or Call the Haunted for Night Train, or Night Express, and this just goes really well in that. And it's kind of like the same deal with Dark World Dealings, that you just want to use it to get certain cards to the grave, which would be Zephyros, Bat Train, Titanial, or possibly Night Express if you want to Call the Haunted, or even Dandelion. So this just combos with a bunch of the monsters. That helps add a little bit of consistency and draw power, and that's something that a lot of Malefic decks are lacking in, so I think it really helps. Then of course Duality, that's just a staple of adding consistency to any deck that needs it. Nothing really worth explaining there. Then MST, same thing. I mean, it's Malefics. It's really important that you protect your key monsters, so if you can get rid of some back row, that's always nice. Next up is Lance, and this is kind of where the staples for any Malefic deck come into play, because any Malefic deck is going to be running Lance, or at least it should be, depending on what else is running. A standard Malefic deck should be running this because, again, you want to protect your key monsters. So if you attack and they use something like a Mirror Force, or even if you summon it and they use Bottomless, you can protect it with Lance against pretty much anything. And then because it has 4,000 attack, you can still potentially attack with it that turn if you haven't already, because 3,200 attack is still enough to get over pretty much anything most decks are going to have. Then next up is Miracle Fertilizer. This card is so good and so important. Every single turn you'll be able to special summon another plant type monster. The best option is going to be to continuously special summon Titanials, because if you use it on Lonefire Blossom, which it's still a good play, you can still do that, but if you use Lonefire Blossom's effect to tribute itself, then Miracle Fertilizer goes to the grave with it, and you don't want that if you can get out the Titanials instead. And what one of the best plays with this possibly is say you have both Titanials in your grave, and then one turn you bring one back, next turn you bring the other one back, then what you can do is you overlay them into one of the rank 8s. I suggest number 62, which I'll get into later, but then it eliminates any threats of Fertilizer sending itself to the grave, because then once the monsters are detached and back in the grave, you can start using Fertilizer again and bring them both back, which is really overpowered. Next up is Mausoleum of the Emperor. I was running this card at 3, or I'm sorry, I was thinking of running this card at 3 because it's really important to have either a Mausoleum, which is a field, or Skill Drain on the field for Malefic Cyber End, or to get one of these cards out if you're really needing to, if they're just stuck in your hand. But 2 has actually just been fine. It really hasn't felt like I've needed 3. In fact, even having 2 has felt like a little bit too many. Like, I'll have one out and no one will ever touch it, and then the other one will just be kind of dead in my hands. Or I'll have Skill Drain and then all the protection in the world with Dark Bribe and Titanial, and I won't even need this. So I think 2 is an okay number to be running. Next up, Skill Drain. This is easily the most important card in the deck. I mean, this is what everything is meant to be protecting. So Skill Drain, really simply put, for Malefics, it lets you get out your Cyber End, it negates it from stopping your other monster from attacking, puts Night Express to 3k attack. It doesn't actually affect the Titanial, doesn't affect this, and it's just, it really hurts your opponent's deck. I mean, that's pretty much the point of that you want to run Skill Drain friendly monsters while your opponent suffers. Next up is Call the Haunted. Pretty simple. I mean, it's just a staple, bring back Titanial, bring back Lonefire Blossom or Night Express. And then there's Dark Bribe, which this is really important too, because it's how you're going to be protecting Skill Drain, or I mean, you can use it on any spell or trap that your opponent activates, but it's really intended for the skill drain. Just so when your opponent activates an MST or Malevolent Catastrophe or something, if you're playing against artifacts, you can just say nope, and then if they don't draw into another one of their spell and trap removal, chances are they won't be able to get over it, and whatever they drew into won't really help them at all. And then moving on to the extra deck, it's absolutely necessary to have 3 Cyber Ends because you need them to summon the Malefic Cyber End Dragon. And then I'm running a few rank 10s because you can make them with Cyber End and Night Express. They're having a few situations where maybe they have stall cards or something and you can't get over it, so you make this Sky Palace instead and just get over there, or get over them. Or of course, if you need some quick burn damage to end the game, there's always Gustav Mechs. Next up are the rank 8s. Now these are, I use them pretty commonly. Like I was saying with Titanial, when you use double Titanial to make it, you send the materials to the grave, and then you can reuse Fertilizer, and they're also very skill drain friendly. I mean, this thing's effect is kind of redundant unless you're going for some sort of an OTK. Like it's already 4,000 attack, and it just increases its attack even more, so all I'm using it for is its base 4k, which is very skill drain friendly. I don't need the other effect to actually make it good. So you can just make a nice simple 4k attacker, and then Tachyon Dragon and Dragon Knight are for if you don't have skill drain on the field and there's something really troublesome out that you need to negate or protect from, you can use one of those. Next up is Crazy Box. There's enough level 4s in this deck that you could potentially use this. It's a very skill drain friendly card, of course, because it has 3,000 attack and it negates its effect that it can't attack. Of course, you can also get Saki and use one of 6 effects to hopefully do something good. Then there is Honor Arc. I think at this point this is just a staple for anything running level 4s. Let's see, what are they calling this now? Excite Knight, right? I'm still used to Belzebuth or whatever it was. Otherwise, this is just a staple too now. That it's just if you really need to nuke the field, you can. Then there is Acid Golem. This is actually another skill drain friendly card that if you have either Dandelion or Lonefire Blossom, maybe you're out of plants in your deck and you just want to use these for an XYZ summon, you make Acid Golem because skill drain on the field just makes it a 3k beater. And then finally, to wrap everything up, we have Tree Spirit. I haven't had to use this one yet, but it's so good with plants in general that it was hard not to. So if skill drain isn't on the field or it gets destroyed or something, you can use this to either set up your grave with Titanial or Dandy or even Lonefire Blossom, or of course you can use them to special summon them, and then that gets the deck going. So this is Royal Malefics. I will be doing the second build in a few moments, so stay tuned for that. And if you enjoyed this video, please comment, like, subscribe, and stay brutal.